Hi, Tracy.
Hey, Patty, I see you've got visitors.
I do. They came for the end of the story. Ching told Mocha, and Mocha thought he better come down and listen to the end of the story.
Oh, that's great. Well, chapter 10 is called A Big Apple.
So now we get to find out how um, those horses knew his mom.
Yeah, I'm curious. Happy looked at Big Ben to Goldie and back again, not knowing what to say. Was it true? Did they know his mom? We were your mom's best friends when she lived here at the Big Apple Barn, Goldie explained, sensing his confusion. It isn't the same without her here, Big Ben said. She was always the best at discovering new patches of clover, he added with a bit of a chuckle. Happy couldn't believe it. His mom had actually lived here? Now he knew why she was so sure that Big Apple Barn would be a good home for him. At least it would have been if he hadn't messed everything up. Diane had been talking to you about coming here, Goldie explained. She's excited to have you here. Gracie was one of her best school ponies ever, and good new school ponies aren't easy to find. Happy kicked at the grass. Well, I'm not so sure she's glad to have me now, he said. I wasn't very good yesterday. He didn't know how much else he could say it. He looked at Goldie and Big Ben again and saw how understanding their eyes were. I bolted with Andrea on my back, Happy said. I was so nervous, I had so much energy, I just couldn't stop. Happy lowered his head, expecting to be scolded. Happy, Goldie soothed him. It's your first time being ridden in a new place. It takes time to get used to new things. Diane understands. She worked with all kinds of new ponies and horses. Happy looked up and was hopeful. Big Ben simply nodded his head in his noble way. Don't worry yourself over it, Happy, Goldie advised. Things will work out. Happy sighed with relief, and he looked at Goldie and wanted to believe her. In the meantime, help yourself to some clover, the older pony offered. Happy had almost forgotten about the clover. He reached down and nibbled a few tender buds. They tasted so good, almost like at home. After a few more bites, Happy felt a surge of joy. He wasn't so alone after all. Goldie and Big Ben knew Gracie as mom, and there was all kinds of clover here. A bright butterfly flitted by. Happy said goodbye to Goldie and Big Ben and then trotted after the butterfly. He felt so good he gave a playful buck and almost forgot he was in a new place. Then he heard his name, Happy! He looked around. It was Diane, Andrea, and Ivy. They were all standing by the pasture fence, and they were watching him. He ran towards the gate. What do you think? Diane asked her daughters. Should we give him another try? Happy tossed his head, hoping for a second chance. They brought him in from the field, and they got him all worked over to give him a good brushing. They combed his mane and his tail and took his brush all over his body. Happy savored every second. He felt so good and clean, even after the saddle was on his back. When it was time for Andrea to buckle on the girth, he didn't pin back his ears, and this time the girth didn't feel so tight. Andrea led Happy outside, and Diane and Ivy climbed onto the fence by the ring so they could watch. Happy stood still as Andrea pulled herself onto the saddle. He waited for her to tell him what to do. He listened very closely. He didn't want to mess up again. He thought about everything Mrs. Shoemaker had taught him, and he remembered his mother's best advice about a pony and a rider and how they all worked together. He knew he had just learned that lesson during her days as a school pony at the Big Apple Barn, and that's how she knew. Happy was so nervous, but he walked, trotted, and cantered right on cue. He even hopped over a small jump in the center of the ring. Andrea was a good rider. She knew how to tell Happy what she wanted, and Happy could do what she asked if he paid attention. When Andrea eventually pulled Happy to a halt, he was breathing heavily. It was hard work being good. Diane and Ivy clapped, and they hurried over to Happy's side and gave him a good long pat. He was so good, Andrea exclaimed. He did everything just as I told him. It seemed like he really wanted to work with me. That sounds like a sign of a good school pony, Diane said, just like his mom. Ivy didn't say anything. She simply scratched him behind the ears. Diane and her daughters walked with Happy as they cooled him down. Then they took him back to the barn and removed his saddle and bridle and took him to his stall. As Happy stepped into the stall, he saw Roscoe sitting by the rim of his feed bucket. The mouse gave him a thumbs up sign and a toothy grin. Happy reached down and brushed his nose on the mouse's pink ears. "Thanks," he whispered. And then Happy whirled around and put his head over his stall door. Diane, Andrea, and Ivy were still there, waiting for him. "Oh, look how happy he is now, Mom," Andrea said. "I think he likes being here now." "I hope he does," Diane replied. "I like having him here too, and I sure think our riding students will too." Happy tossed his head up and down and gave a lively whinny. "As you know what?" Ivy said in her soft voice. "I think Happy is a really good name for him after all." "You're right, Ivy," Diane agreed. "Happy fits him perfectly." Happy couldn't have agreed more. Diane and Andrea turned to walk down the aisle, but Ivy stayed with Happy. "Here you go, boy," Ivy said. "You were such a good pony today." And in her hand she held the biggest, juiciest apple Happy had ever seen. Carefully, Happy bit into the apple. It was so big he couldn't get his mouth around all the way around it. He reached out for the rest of the apple, and then he licked the juice from Ivy's hand. Ivy giggled. As Happy tasted the sweetness of the apple, he looked to Roscoe and then to Ivy. And then he thought of Diana and Andrea, Goldie and Mr. Big Ben. That's when he decided that Big Apple Barn was a good name for this place, too. It was big and new, but he had found friends, and he was sure that he would have a lot of adventures here. Most of all, Big Apple Barn felt like a happy home, and Happy felt like a happy, lucky pony. The end. Yeah.
That was a good story.
I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope all of you at home enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
That's
Happy ending.
happy ending for a happy pony and a happy year for everybody, I hope. Life is full of lots of adventures, and we're right in the middle of one right now. So enjoy your beautiful day outside today, and mwah, I hope you enjoyed the book study.